there were two little boys. They were best friends at a church. And they both had a reputation of getting in trouble. They were troublemakers in the church. So one Sunday, one of the boys was homesick. But the other boy, not wanting to let his friend down, was twice as bad as normal. Right? So as he was running through the sanctuary after church, the pastor grabbed him by the shirt and angrily said, "Where's God?" The little boy was frightened and didn't know what to say. The pastor continues. He continued to the boy, "I want you to go home and think about it. And I don't want you to come back until you tell me where is God." Right? So the boy went home and he called his sick friend on the phone and he said, "Guess what? They've lost God. And they're trying to blame it on us." All right. So the Bible uses many metaphors to describe light. So light is good. It represents righteousness. It represents purity, integrity. God is associated himself with light. Jesus, he declared that he is the light. And those who believe in him have the light of life and are sons of light. David, he spoke of God's word as being the lamp unto his feet and a light unto his path. And Jesus said to those that have received God and received his love, that you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So we have a clear understanding of light. Light is a positive context in every sort of the way throughout the Bible. So if light is good, then the opposite must be true about darkness. Right? So throughout the Bible we have lots of negative context regarding darkness. Darkness is typically surrounded by sin. Sin is, we find throughout the Bible, is a place of darkness, right? Evil desires and disobedience and unholy things. That's darkness. We find a lot of metaphors in the Bible that tie to this theme of darkness. And Jesus, he speaks of darkness in our heart from disobedience to God's ways. If anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him, is what John tells us in the Gospels. So Jesus himself, he also said at one point that the sons of the kingdom, which are Israel, if they don't believe in him with the faith like the centurion, this was when he was amazed at the faith of the centurion, they will be thrown into outer darkness, and in that place there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there is a fine line that is drawn between light and darkness. And many of us have experienced in a time in our life that we could say was dark. I'm not talking about darkness in the sense of walking in deliberate sin. I'm talking about times in our life when we experience hurtful events, unexpected circumstances. Times when we feel like, God, why? And we enter into this darkness. Confusion is in this darkness. When when things happen around us and we just can't explain it, we find ourselves in a dark place. So we can all identify with dark moments in our life. And we live in a broken world, so, 1 minute things will be great, and the next minute you can get hit, and all of a sudden everything flipped upside down, and your whole world turned upside down, right? So the world is broken, right? So there is no guarantee that everything will be perfect tomorrow. Things will happen. We have our joyful times, and we have our dark times. So the Israelites, they experienced many times and many periods throughout their history, they experienced a lot of dark points or dark events in their life. They were slaves under Egyptian control for 400 years. And Moses was used by God to free them and get them out from the darkness that they were in. Yet several years later, the king of Babylon, he was Nebuchadnezzar, he raided Jerusalem. And that's when the exile happened. And Israel found themselves again in a dark place. 70 years living under a pagan empire, pagan rulership. So, a lot of the Israelites, they fell into pagan worship. And during the exile, they went into Babylon. Not everybody from the Israelites were unfaithful to God. There were God-fearing, God-loving people that were taken during the exile. People like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Zerubbabel, the cupbearer, Nehemiah, the cupbearer, Ezra the prophet, Jeremiah the prophet, Ezekiel the priest. Surely, these people didn't deserve to be taken in exile. They didn't deserve to be held captive. These were God-fearing, God-faithful, loving people of God. And yet, we find them taken into captive with all the other Israelites that turned their face from God and turned their back on God and followed the idols of their days. But they all together, the God-fearing and the people that turned their face on God, they all experienced the darkness. The darkness of living in that pagan Babylonian empire. So though it was a long period of darkness, it was a different kind of darkness. Eventually, the king of Persia, King Cyrus, would raid Babylon and be used by God to free Israel and actually assist Israel into building a nation once again. King Cyrus was not a God follower. He was not faithful to Jehovah. He had his own God, right? But God used him. He used King Cyrus to do this, to free the people, his people, the people that God loved, right? And that's where we are in Isaiah 45, verse 1 through 7. And it says, "Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates. And the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron. I will give thee the treasures of darkness, and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, I have even called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. I gird thee, though thou hast not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west, that there is none beside me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So, before we go on, I just want to clarify the last part of that. The last verse there. Just so there's no confusion. King James, I'm reading from the King James Version. And it says that God, what is this? When God is talking, it says, I create evil. Okay, that's not the word. That word is not rightly translated. I create calamity. So circumstances happen. So calamity. God does not create evil. God doesn't do evil. God is only good. Right? So as I read this chapter, I couldn't wrap my mind around verse 3. It says, and I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. What is that? I give thee the treasures of darkness. That doesn't sound right. Something is wrong here. So I kind of took time to try to figure this out, to understand how could this be? Like this is a strange thing that God is saying. That I give thee treasures of darkness and hidden riches in secret places. Is it possible that there could be a holy darkness? A holy darkness. That's weird. That's strange. That doesn't make any sense. You know, when I was just thinking about this, I was like, no, the holy and darkness, no, that doesn't mix. There's no way that can't be a thing, to have holy and darkness. I felt like, as I was grappling with this, I felt like Peter when he saw the sheets coming down. He saw the animals, the 4-footed animals on the sheets, and God said, Peter, kill and eat. And he said, no, Lord. Right? He said, I follow the Jewish laws, and no. Right? So he was completely against that. He said, no, Lord. He said no to the voice of God speaking to him. And I was kind of like this, like, holy darkness, no, there's no way. It doesn't make sense. It can't be. And like Peter, I was like, not so, Lord. So I started to think about the faithful men of God during this Babylonian exile. See, they had every right to look at their circumstances and say that God had turned their back on them. To say that God had forsaken them and that God no longer loved them. They had every right to do that. They were being taken into a foreign nation and being practically slaves and being told they have to worship their gods and under their power and their hand on them, heavy-handed on them. Yet, the faithful ones of them remain faithful during this time. Regardless of the circumstances that they were going through, they still chose to honor God within the darkness that they were going through. You see, how we react to the darkness that we face is essential in the maturity of our faith. See, we all know that trials and tribulations are going to come. It's going to happen, right? We've all experienced them, and more is coming, right? So it's not like it's something that we can escape. But how we respond to the darkness, to the trials and the things that come against us, this will determine our strength of faith in God, or how much we empower the enemy during our dark times, right? So how I react in those moments will either build me up and increase my faith and draw me nearer to God, or it will empower the enemy to continue pouring thoughts into my mind, right? So either or is going to happen in this time of darkness. You see, it's in the darkness of a mother's womb that God forms a life, creates life, creates being, creates a future something, right? In that darkness. It was in the darkness of a prison cell where Joseph was held that God planted a dream in Pharaoh's mind that would ultimately change the course of his life. It was the darkness of the calamity that surrounded Job that caused Job to ask questions, to go before God and ask God, why is this happening? And in turn, find out that he serves an awesome God. It was in that darkness that Job was in. It was in the darkness of the cave of Adullam where David was found. In that cave is where we find he becomes a leader of 400 men. Soon he would become the leader of a unified nation for many, many years. So how do we react? How do we react in those moments when they come at us? Because it's our darkest times that may be forming our greatest attributes, that may be sharpening our most strongest weapons for what's about to come. Could be in that moment where we begin to see God in a light that we've never known before and draw closer to Him in ways that we have never experienced prior to it. John, could you put that PDF? All right. Lex Gillette, he was born in 1984 in Raleigh, North Carolina. And when when he was 3 years old, he was the doctors found a cataract in his eye, and they attempted to treat him. And while he was in recovery, he sustained a retina detachment in his left eye. And by the time he was 8 years old, the doctors had performed 10 operations on his right eye, just trying to save it. So, unfortunately, the doctors were not successful. And at 8 years old, he was 100% legally blind. His mother, her name is Verdina Gillette Sims. She remembers being in the hospital on that very last operation. She remembers wheeling him in to the operation room. And as he entered the room, she could hear him screaming. She said, I think that's the moment that I realized that he's going to be blind for the rest of his life. It's a dark, dark place to be. What do you do when you haven't even started life? You haven't even done anything yet. And you have all these ambitions and these dreams and as you're playing with your friends and the things that you want to do and thinking about your future. And all of a sudden, you find yourself in a darkness that will never go away, that will remain for as long as you live. How dramatic is the shift and the change that boy had to go through in order to live life as normal as he could without his eyes at such a young age. So, learned how to ride his bike. He would run and he would refuse to hold on to sense things and hear things, and over the years the other senses began to become he had a talent in him. He soon had a passion for the long jump. You guys, edge of the sand pit, and then they jump feet first. You can see the picture up there. They fly but yet he had a passion for that. He strove to do that. Now, he was good enough to get into the Olympics. The thing with the long jump or the Paralympics for the blind is just a regular track and field or a runner or hurdle jumper, any of that, is that there's a guide that stands beside the runner, communicating with them all along. The guide is able to stand at the line, and all he could do is yell. He can yell. That's all he can do. So, in this case, the guide would take the runner at the starting point of where he will run, square straight, because he can't see, so he can run straight, squares his shoulder, stands on the right before the sand pit, and begins to yell, "Fly, fly, fly, fly." Or the runner meets the guy gets out of the way. The runner has to be so in tune with the voice that he jumps at the right moment, or else he will run into the pit and get hurt. So he had to rely on the voice, not the darkness that he was in. He had to keep his ears tuned, regardless of how dark it is, regardless of the other sounds that are happening, regardless of the crowd, the cheers, the whistles, the sounds of people walk. All that had to be put out, because if he doesn't hear the guide well, he can get hurt badly. He can run off track, he can run into the pit. Sure enough, in 2015, at the Paralympics in Qatar, fly, fly, fly. He's running, but he's not running on course. He's running toward the cement. He soars in the air and lands right on the cement. If you see that picture, evaluation. His uniform was all torn up. He was all bruised up. This was his passion, and nothing was going to stop him from doing that. He squares up, he runs. They won the gold medal by his run, by his jump that year. As a matter of fact, he tied his The most accomplished, totally blind, triple jumper in the history of the U.S. Paralympics, that is. He's a 3-time Paralympic medalist, a reigning world champion in the long jump. He's the world record out the voice. We hear that voice too. God speaks to us, and we have a voice as well. God is not silent. He speaks to every one of us. How I react to my darkness will direct me on where I'm going to go. I choose to hear the voice of God, regardless of how painful a situation may be. Deep down in my heart, I know that God knows what He's doing. God knows. I can trust God. In Matthew 16, verses 21 and 23, it says, "From that time, Jesus began to show His disciples that He must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and be raised up on the third day. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, 'God forbid, this shall never happen to you.' But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. Stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but on man's.' Oh God, may I never be a stumbling block to the molding hand of the potter in my life. Help me to find you. That's my prayer. Help me to find you in every moment, every dark moment. I don't know the answers, but help me to where I can't see, where I can't navigate, where I don't know what my next step will be, or the next decision to make. I don't know where to go from here. Help me to find you. Help me to find you so I can lean on you, so that I can hear you. And I'm about to go into a holy darkness. Your eyes are looking at death, but my eyes see the salvation of your soul. When the chief priests and the officers came to in the Garden of Gethsemane, in Luke 22:53, it says, "But this is your hour and the power of darkness." This is not the power of evil. But there is a holy darkness about to unfold. You see, there is no power of evil that can make Jesus do anything. No tempter, no sin, no Don't you think that I can call on my Father and he would dispatch 12 legions of angels right now? No evil can happen to Jesus unless it was a holy darkness, right? This is not an evil darkness that we're talking about here. Jesus is about to enter. Obedience is the molding hand of God. So that we could hear him above anything else. He molds us so that we can walk in the darkness. So that we can hear him and what he's saying and not what the enemy is saying to my mind. In dark places. These are what they are. These are the treasures that the enemy hold of my mind. The enemy can't plant anything in my heart. He can't deceive me. He can't cause me to stumble. He can't cause me to do anything. That is the power of holy darkness. When I'm in a place where I trust God and not the voice. If we're pushing back against his voice, he has no power. He can't get in my mind. He can't stir my heart. In the hard times and in the trying times. When we become obedient, true, that's not going to happen. We're going to pray this through. We become an offensive force. We begin to move in the power of God. We begin to move in what to have liberty in our mind and liberty in our hearts, to be able to believe. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even if he doesn't, it's all right with me, because God is still good. God, and I know he's with me. Amen. Amen. Thank God.